boy, how about that Acolyte? So, we are halfway through the first, possibly only season of the Acolyte, and I'm sorry, I just don't see this thing miraculously kicking into gear for the back half. But, before I get into my problems with the Acolyte, I want to first go through things that have no bearing on the quality or my opinion of the show. First, its showrunner is a lesbian woman. People getting mad about this is why Star Wars fans are the easiest people to dunk on. I put fans in quotes because y'all spend a lot more time talking about how much you hate Star Wars for folks who claim to be fans of it. It's just crazy how the same people who are like, justice for Hayden, are now doing the exact same thing to the current Star Wars directors and actors that the fans did for the prequels. But moving on. Leslie Headland and her Russian Doll collaborators, quite a few of whom carried over to The Acolyte, are demonstrably talented writers and directors. Do you know how many of us would kill to have a Russian Doll under our belts? It's the kind of show that makes me go, yeah, I really need to step my shit up if I want to play in the big leagues. And I say this as a technically card-carrying member of the WGA. Nyoko. The writing in The Acolyte has not been, great, but few people are hitting dingers all the time. I mean, Paul Schrader directed The Canyons and First Reformed within 4 years of each other. There's peaks and valleys, baby. You can't win them all. Second thing that has no effect on the quality of The Acolyte: the woke. I think wokeness, whether you're pro or anti, is the least interesting lens to critique a story. I love the Rambo films, even though the sequels are Reagan era as and I'm generally a leftist. I ain't gotta agree entirely with the film's politics to appreciate its merits as a movie. And I know this isn't true of all fans and all people who have problems with the show, but I'm not gonna sit here and act like that element isn't there. Personally, I'm a church-going, heterosexual, cisgender male, but I love the films of Gregg Araki and John Waters. New queer cinema, along with the black renaissance of the early 90s, was formative for me, finding my voice as a filmmaker. Like, half of my friends are some form of LGBT or Q, so those themes being present really have no bearing on whether or not I like a movie or a show. I just care about how well you tell the story. If it does have themes regarding race, sexuality, or gender, then I hope that it actually explores them in a way that's interesting and honest, as opposed to just half-assing it because you're afraid to offend the easily offended. Like, they're already going to be triggered at the presence of gay people. Just go for it. And in the case of The Acolyte, it's not even Disney woke, like, at all. There's no ham-fisted speeches about being a strong black lesbian in the galaxy. The queer themes are at best working on dentist logic. It is all about the implication. It only really gestures at its queer relationships, and even Leslie Headland has said she doesn't think she made a show that was designed around queer themes. Like, if these two scenes are enough to have you triggered over the woke infecting everything, you got no business calling anyone a snowflake, my guy. Last thing that has no bearing on the quality of the show. This guy getting Anakin and Luke confused. I think we all got a little too Sam Witwer pilled and expect that to be the gold standard of all Star Wars actors. Like, it's great when talent can bring their own knowledge of the material to a project, but it's not entirely necessary. Walton Goggins just killed it as the Ghoul, and he's on record as having never played the Fallout games. Hell, Harrison Ford, Han Solo himself, famously knows all about Wars lore. And if we expect every actor in a Star Wars to bring an encyclopedic knowledge to the project, we just wouldn't have Star Wars anymore. Which, like, you know, I mean, I wouldn't say no to a hiatus. And specifically to the group of folks always out here talking about, well, what's the context? When your fave says a slur, y'all have very little chill when a man gets, admittedly, a very easy Star Wars fact wrong. You don't know how long the press junket was going for, how many interviews he'd already done. Mans could have just been tired and had a mental slip. Or he could just not be into the wars like that, which is fine. He ain't writing, directing, or producing the thing. His job is to know his lines, know his character, and deliver it truthfully between action and cut. That's it. So, with all that out the way, let's get into why The Acolyte has had me going, shit's weak, for for these last couple episodes. First off, this narrative framework is just clunky, y'all. We've only got 8 hours of story, and it's already wasted one on a backstory that didn't answer any questions, give us any deeper insight into the characters, or add some interesting lore points to the High Republic. Personally, I wasn't tripping off the implication that the twins were conceived through Force IVF. I get it's one of the more mythic aspects of Anakin's backstory, but it's a little much to call it character assassination, y'all. This is a man who killed the women and the children too. Twice! The man who gave the remaining chunk to Alderaan to the Queen of Shutoran to remind her what happens when royal families resist the Emperor's will. I'm sorry, but ain't no airball of a Star Wars show capable of assassinating Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker's character. You know what the show is capable of doing though? Boring me to pieces. Y'all don't understand how hype I was specifically for episode 3. Kaganada is one of my favorite working directors. Columbus, and especially After Yang, are just masterful works. But I don't know what happened here, y'all. Like, whew, that whole ceremony thing was yeah, I was struggling to get through that one, I tell you what. And I'm not entirely opposed to, like, the flashbacks. They're kind of necessary to, like, flesh out what's going on, but instead of presumably using 2 of the 8 episodes to look at the past, the flashback arc should have been spread across the entire show. It'd be a solid linking mechanism between May and Osha's storylines. As their paths slowly head into a collision course, they'd both reflect on how the events of their past got to them where they're at today. As they mutually realize who's doing the killing and who's on their tail, the flashback narrative would continue to escalate. Because, like, right now, the show is just holding too much to its chest. Like, we don't know all of what went down with the Bryndock, but if the Jedi or a Jedi did do some sketchy shit, show that off rip. For example, how this could work. One detail I loved in the Heir of the Empire trilogy was the usage of Delta Source. So, the New Republic had a mole leaking critical info to Grand Admiral Thrawn. The reader finds out who Delta Source is before the characters do, so it adds some tension when you see Leia, Winter, and Senator Iblis getting hotter and colder on finding out who it is. If we knew that one of the lead Jedi was low-key the inciting incident for all this going down, it would add something this show desperately needs. Tension! Allegedly, this is supposed to be a murder mystery across the galaxy, but boy, they are taking their sweet time, and there ain't much in the way of mystery. Like, I guess the biggest question I have is, who's the person behind the mask? But at this point, I don't know if any answer is going to be particularly satisfying. Like, I don't care enough about any of these characters or anything's established to be like, oh shit, them? And look, I'm not mad at a slow burn if it's effectively building tension, but dog, this has just been the same 4 niggas having the same 4 conversations. I don't want to be a Jedi. Well, you know what? Maybe I want to be a Jedi. You know what? Never mind. I don't want to be a Jedi. Or, you know, they're still good in her. She's a murderer. She's your sister. Damn. And then we get your weekly reminder that the Jedi are inefficient bureaucrats, a point already made quite concisely in the prequels, and then, you know, occasionally we'll get some of May doing Acolyte stuff. If we're lucky, repeat, repeat, repeat. The action has been cool, but there's so little of it. I thought this was going to be a balls-to-the-wall, martial arts-infused action crime thriller set in Star Wars. Instead, we're just getting a lot of uninteresting dialogue that's personally not doing much for me. This is a summer Star Wars. It's supposed to be a ride. I wanted Space Mountain pacing, and each week they've just been giving me It's a Small World. And I think episode 4 was like the worst offender, the one that kind of just threw it over the edge for me, because nothing interesting happens until literally the last 5 minutes. Our heroes are supposedly in a race against time to stop Cal Naka from getting got, yet they just moseying through the forest, stopping every now and again for side conversations that don't really add any more insight, context, depth than what we already know about these characters. Outside of that one bug in a trap, this doesn't feel like a dangerous forest that has failed all who've tried to venture through it. There's a distinct lack of urgency and danger to the story that is sorely needed to keep you invested in the stakes instead of half watching it while scrolling through Insta. While I generally have differing Star Wars opinions from Jeremy Jahns, I do respect his opinions as the man knows what he wants from the wars and he's an OG in the game. In his first Acolyte review, he did hit the nail on the head when it said it feels like CW Star Wars, both in the budget but also the YA feel. And I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. Like, maybe this was an attempt at YA Star Wars, but it's just not really finding a compelling vibe. The best YA stories, be it Harry Potter or Hunger Games, generally have themes similar to Star Wars, so it's not a stretch to think that approach could work, but it's just not clicking here. And it's really wild if you think about it, because Hunger Games Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes fairly effectively accomplished what I think this was trying to do, and showing how circumstance can turn a good person into a monster. And this brings me to my second to last beef with this show. It's supposed to be about the rise of a Sith Acolyte, but we've barely spent any time with the Sith or the Acolyte. We're not seeing much in the way of Sith rituals, traditions, or even giving a good reason why this is the perfect moment for the Sith to ascend. You don't have to give us everything off rip, but give us something. Set the table so we understand what the end goal is, who wants what, and why. For a show about the Sith, there's no underlying sense of darkness to much of any of this. It feels like Disney greenlit a show about the Sith, realized how dark that would have to be, and was like, okay, so like, it's still a show about the Sith, but, and we're just getting crazy here, hear us out. What if it was also mostly, largely, about the High Republic Jedi? Like, wouldn't that be fun? It's like two tonally distinct shows happening at once, with not enough time being given to make either angle all that interesting. I went into this hoping for like 70% Sith badassery with 30% Jedi desperately trying to keep up. Instead, it's just been 100% mid. I'm not particularly mad at it. I don't think it's like abysmal. I don't think it's particularly good. And my last beef with the Acolyte is one particular to my brand of Star Wars fan. It just feels like a less interesting version of things we got in the old EU. Now, this has been a problem with a lot of modern Star Wars. Kylo and Rey were just a not related, less interesting version of Jaina and Jacen Solo. Heck, they basically gender swapped Mara Jade for Han Solo for Kylo's real heel turn. So take that, woke left. How do you like it when we do it? I've started reading some of the High Republic comics, and I'm going through the first book right now, and overall it's just a less interesting iteration of the Old Republic. The Nihil or Nile, however you say their name, are just a not as cool take on the Yuuzhan Vong War, and the Acolyte so far has been a less interesting take on Darth Bane's story. I would have much rather witness Darth Bane implement the rule of two and see the Sith methodically make their presence known across the galaxy. The Acolyte could have started with Darth Bane's first apprentice and almost work as an anthology show, as the apprentices overtake their masters, gradually getting to a final season showing Darth Plagueis and Palpatine's years as master and apprentice. Look, the entire point of this channel is to be a place where I celebrate movies and give humorous yet thoughtful critiques of stories I love and occasionally think are underappreciated. This is and is intended to always be an anomaly of a video. I take more joy in talking about the things I love than the things I don't. The only reason I made this video is because I wanted to put out a reasoned, somewhat nuanced breakdown of why the show isn't really working beyond fanboy nonsense. There's just so much vitriolic noise, and it's so unnecessary. Like, there's a huge segment of fandom still behaving this way and still being surprised why no one is taking any Star Wars criticism seriously. Because it's so easy to write off criticism of modern Star Wars as just hateful fanboys when so many people are review bombing and one-starring and having temper tantrums because the space lesbians are ruining Star Wars. It's fucking fiction, dude. You don't have to watch it. There's Star Wars you can go back to. Look, Some folks are just gonna feel however they feel about race, gender, sexuality, or whatever. That's the truth of the world. But those are their problems and no one else's. It's not the job of any storyteller to capitulate to anyone's prejudices or belief system. And when the only movies that have made money this year are the ones appealing to a diverse swath of the population, it's kind of against their best business interests to listen to whatever that part of the audience has to say. The Acolyte isn't a miss because of race, gender, and sexuality. It's a miss because the plotting is slow. We're 4 hours in with no real core theme or idea being explored in a dynamic fashion, and there's just an inert, almost vibeless quality to the proceedings. It's a show that just feels like it's kind of happening to you. There are real issues with Disney's approach to Star Wars, but they get drowned out by fanboy feelings. And look, I love Star Wars, if that little detour into the extended universe didn't make it clear. I'm not casual about this shit in the slightest, which is also why I don't get in my feelings when Star Wars doesn't live up to my expectations. It's happened before, it'll probably happen again, but I have hope we're still gonna get some cool comics, games, and maybe even a banger movie or two again. Emphasis on the maybe. As of now, we'll see what happens. No one's telling anybody they have to like it, but there are just better ways to express your disapproval. If we want better Star Wars, we need to have better takes. Constructive criticism that can actually be applied, demonstrating that the audience understands the basic tenets of theme, plot, and character, and this just ain't hitting. If you care that much, then you do better. Cause I'm gonna let you in on a secret, Cap. You're not the audience. You are a audience. There's plenty of people who watch Disney Star Wars and either like it, love it, or go, I wasn't really feeling it, so I stopped watching it. Or, it's not my thing, but my kids enjoy it, so, I just put it on for them. And that's the majority of the mainstream audience who this was made for. Folks like us who can go deep into the lore, talk about the rule of two, choices of one, ancient Sith lords, we're a minority. And now you know what that feels like, son. The reason I'm passionate about this is because I am one of you. I'm deep into the wars, and I want them to be better. I want them to be more consistent. I want the idea of what a Star Wars story can be expanded beyond the strained and limited framework it's currently shackled in. Disney can and should do better than The Acolyte, than Solo, than Boba Fett, than Rise of Gosh Darn Skywalker. But as fans, we also can and should do better if you're gonna pop out and critique niggas. While I don't believe criticism is as meaningful as art, I do believe it serves a necessary purpose in helping artists thrive and improve. Iron sharpening iron and all that. My best friend is one of my biggest critics, and I can measure the effect his critique has had on both my filmmaking and content creation. But if all his critique was just mean-spirited nonsense, I'd probably just tune him out. If you want to be a critic, actually be a critic. If you want to be a fanboy,
have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up.
Anyway, that's my spiel. We're not doing this again. I'll see you next week with a regularly scheduled programming. Be civil in the comments, but if it's the internet, you guys know what civility is. Later.